Before I begin, since this video contains video footage from, but not exclusively owned by, fair use under copyright laws, the BBC, The Guardian, and Julia Hartley-Brewer's show on Talk Radio, I feel the need to point out that the news arm of the BBC, The Guardian, and Talk Radio has continuing issues with transphobic leanings in their news coverage. While I understand that transphobia does not represent the views of everyone in these organisations, and I have only used footage which is pertinent to my specific involvement in the Republican protests, I still feel the need to point out that both the BBC and The Guardian have published transphobic articles in the past without apology, and Julia Hartley-Brewer in particular has repeatedly refused to respect trans people or their right to exist on multiple occasions. I condemn transphobia wherever it comes from and hope that these organisations do better in the future. Thank you. So, the good news is I didn't get arrested.
The Met Police today accused of overreaching. 52 arrests of Republicans, climate protesters and animal rights activists. Some were 5 miles away from the King yesterday, arrested before he'd even reached the Abbey.
All of those things the Met Police has accepted were wrong. I think they intentionally lied. I think they made it up because they wanted to take these protesters out under this new law, which makes it so easy to prevent any protest that is disruptive. Now, protest is meant to be disruptive. If it's not, it's just you having a yap at the side of the road. Ain't nobody going to pay attention to that.
These are perhaps not the images of the coronation Britain had hoped to project. The news of 64 arrests beamed around the world. But today, the government backed the police using new powers.
Among a sea of well-wishers, a group who want to see an end to the monarchy. The UK's leading Republican movement bearing banners saying, "Not my king." Their ambition to abolish the monarchy peacefully and move to a parliamentary republic.
We're protesting the procession today, in part because we don't believe in a hereditary monarchy, and in part because it's insane that we're spending all this money on a parade when there are homeless people sleeping in front of Westminster Abbey. The whole idea of a hereditary monarchy is ridiculous. There's no magic blood in this world. Like, the 67 million people on these islands should be able to choose their own head of state.
Not my king, 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 not my king. Listen to the enslavement of my ancestors! Not my king, not my king, not my king, not my king, not my king. You can shove your coronation, shove your coronation, shove your coronation up your arse.
Hello and welcome to the long-awaited return of Radical Rants. Have an hour-long special on the crazy way the police behaved over the coronation protests. As you may guess, and as you've seen from the intro, I may have had some involvement. I am not going to be committing to doing Radical Rants on a regular basis. I am too busy, I have too much on, not meaning to go on too much of a tangent here, but I'm currently on a student exchange in Germany, hence why my place of living is an acceptable size and not a shoebox. And unlike in England where you get 3 or 4 lessons a week for £9 a year, here we get, well, I have 11 lessons a week. And it's free. So that's like a lot of studying, a lot of reading. I do not have time to be doing radical rants on a weekly or monthly basis. So I'm bringing it back sporadically because I miss it. So let's get on with the topic at hand. This video is not scripted because I don't have time. So it's going to be a little bit messy. Please bear with me. Now let's have a look at what me from the past had to say during the protests.
Hi, I'm here today protesting the monarchy with Republic and other groups as well. We're here in London protesting the monarchy because it's a deeply undemocratic institution. I'm here with some friends that I've made. Why are you here protesting today?
Because the monarchy is symbolic of everything that is wrong with the country in terms of hereditary privilege, lack of meritocracy, and Charles is a twat.
What about you?
Yes, exactly that. Abolish the monarchy.
Yes, I completely agree. And of course what you can hear behind me from the speakers is a load of religious music. And that's because for as long as we have a monarchy, it is impossible to have separation of church and state. Now, I massively support freedom of religion, but I don't think that your religion has any more right to control the laws of my country than my atheism does. So let's abolish the monarchy and have separation of church and state so everybody's beliefs can be equal. But that's not the only thing that bothers me about this whole archaic, aristocratic, tax-evading, institutionally corrupt institution. No, there's lots of other problems with it, including the whole equality under the law thing. We're all supposed to be equal under the law, and yet we have a king who gets to look at, change, and alter legislation he doesn't like before Parliament even sees it. This is a power he has used over 160 times to our knowledge, including making himself exempt from taxes, all equalities legislation, and all environmental legislation. As you can see, there's quite a heavy police presence. How are you today, sir? Hello? How are you today? Alright. Yeah? We good? Yeah. Do you mind if I ask you a few questions?
Yes.
You do mind?
Yes.
Okay, that's fine. I'll move on to someone else.
No worries.
You have a good day. Excuse me, sir. Do you mind if I ask you some questions? No? I would like to ask an officer some questions, if that's possible. Excuse me, sir. Do you think you'd be able to tell me why Charles was never arrested for his involvement in the Cash for Honours scandal? No? Would you by any chance be able to tell me why Prince Andrew was never arrested in regards to sexual assault allegations? No? Okay, fine. Would you be able to tell me why the king hasn't been arrested for tax evasion? Because he's paid 0% inheritance tax. Okay, we're getting the silent treatment. They don't really want to talk to me. Would you be able to tell me why you arrested the organiser of this event simply for attending with placards, which you already gave him permission to do months ago? No? They're not feeling very talkative. The king claims that he cares about the environment, but just the land he owns would be enough to meet the UK's reforestation targets. But he doesn't do it because he enjoys fox hunting too much. But it's okay. He says he's against fracking. So that means he should get to rule over us in perpetuity without an election.
Holy Father, Almighty, everlasting God, through Jesus
So
Christ,
there's lots of people here, which I'm sure the mainstream media will not tell you. Nobody here has done any civil disobedience, and yet multiple people have been arrested simply for attending. Most people, while they may or may not agree with us, they do agree with freedom of speech, freedom of expression, our rights to hold these beliefs. I walked here over an hour this morning and most members of the public did about an hour, just ignored me. Totally fair enough. The police were eyeing me up the whole time and they stopped and searched me. No need, I wasn't planning anything. But the point is, they didn't stop and search anyone else. The only difference between me and anyone else was I was wearing this hoodie. It's one rule for them, literally, the king is illegally above the law, but a different rule for us. If you think that's wrong, if you think that we should have a real democracy, if you think we deserve a real democratic say over who our head of state is, if you want to be able to hold them to account, and if you want a governmental system where no part of it is exempt from the same laws that we have to abide by, then support us, join us in campaigning against the monarchy, for the abolition of the monarchy, for the creation of a full and proper democracy, and for a referendum. I'll see you on the streets. Solidarity.
Later on, I caught up with more police officers to try and ask them more questions pertaining to the hypocrisy around equality under the law for as long as a monarchy exists. Take a look.
So, why is it that the king was never arrested over the cash for honours scandal? That's fair enough. Your boss, you're the Met, yeah? Yeah. So your boss, if they do something really bad, and the Home Secretary, who's democratically elected, and the Mayor of London says that's not on, then they have to leave their job. It's essentially like a type of impeachment. But that isn't possible for the king. Do you think it's fair that the head of state has the same amount of accountability as your boss does?
Enjoy the rest of your day. I understand what you're saying, but I'm not going to answer. I appreciate your question, but...
Yeah, no, that's fair.
Oh, sorry.
When are you going to release the 6? When are you going to release the 6 you arrested earlier?
I didn't.
I know you didn't. I tell you when it will be. It will be about... It's 8 now. Sorry?
It's 8.
8. You'll release them at 3 in the morning, the most inconvenient time, when you know you can't charge them with anything.
And sure enough, that's exactly what happened. So on the day, a total of 64 people were arrested, all of them unjustified and, in my opinion, most likely illegal. This included 8 members of staff of the official UK Republic organisation, the campaign group. Their crime, turning up to the protest where they said they would turn up. They had been speaking with the police for months on end, and they got very expressed permission off the police. And they turned up exactly where they had permission to turn up, with exactly the things that they had permission to turn up with, which included a sound system and an exact number of placards that all said the same thing: "Not my king." They had expressed permission to do this from the Met. And then the second they turned up, this is going back months, the expressed permission, right up until just a few days before the protest, ongoing expressed permission. And then the second they turn up, they are ambushed and arrested on sight. So clearly, the police were just lying to them for months on end. There are emails proving that it is true, that they had continuous permission from the police going back months, which they have shown to the BBC. Watch this clip here.
ITV News has seen emails proving that Republic had been talking to police about their protest from as early as the 24th of January this year. They had at least one meeting with officers on the 24th of March and kept them informed of their plans right up until the 2nd of May, days before the coronation. But despite that, 6 were arrested on Saturday. Police suspected they had kit to lock themselves to objects illegal under a new act. And today the Met Commissioner, Mark Rowley, defended his force. As I would expect, the arresting officers were vigilant, curious and proactive, he wrote in a newspaper. They formed the reasonable suspicion necessary to arrest. While it's unfortunate that the 6 people affected by this were unable to join the hundreds of peaceful protesters, I support the officers' actions.
Lies! The police? Lying? Never! Who'd have thunk it or thought it? As it happens, I'm actually a fully paid up member of Republic, so I receive their emails. So have a look on the screen now of a screenshot of an email I received from Republic ages ago telling me that they had this ongoing express permission from the police and that they were ongoing in talks with the police. So all members of Republic across the whole of the UK have this second-hand evidence. It's not like they can lie about this. But all 64 arrests made this weekend were totally out of order and, in my opinion, most likely illegal. When the Met Police Commissioner says that the officers did their best, he is lying to you, and he is using the new Public Order Act in order to be able to get away with that lie. They cited, when they arrested the 8 members of staff of Republic, that the adjustable Velcro straps that were being used to hold the placards together, the placards they had permission to bring to the protest, could hypothetically be construed as a lock-on device. It's not a lock-on device. You couldn't lock on with it because a lock-on device is something you use to make it harder or impossible for someone to move you. These straps were adjustable and Velcro. They're not going to do anything. A lock-on is if you glue yourself to something or chain yourself to something. But under the powers of the new Public Order Act, lock-on is so loosely defined that hypothetically you could be arrested just for turning up to a protest holding your partner's hand. All of the arrests made by the police this weekend were a total attack on democracy and freedom to protest, a complete attack on human rights. I'm going to go through all of the people who were arrested in this video, but let's just start with the arrests of Republic UK.
The whole point of today's from the Republican side was visibility, just to show that when the cameras panned round, that they wouldn't see just rows and rows of Doreen loyalists, and to show the world that we're not a nation of monarchies.
But police say they were held on suspicion of breaching the peace and conspiracy to cause public nuisance.
Well, this is where we parked the van, right?
He was detained before he had unloaded any placards for a protest he says police had previously said could happen.
The plan was to have a static, peaceful protest. We'd been very clear and candid with the police about what we're going to do. We said that we're going to have amplifiers, and they said that was okay. Megaphones, they said that was okay. Placards, flags, the whole lot. 2,000 people were going to be down there. They have been dishonest with us from the start, despite our best efforts to be very open and candid with them.
They've arrested 6 of our people, including our main organiser, and they've seized hundreds of placards. They won't tell us what offence these people have been arrested for, and they won't tell us where they're taking them, and they won't say what they've done with our placards.
So, do you think the placards are the kind of reason that these arrests have taken place?
It's hard to see what else it could be. Like, this is a peaceful demonstration. It hasn't even started yet. It's just a bunch of guys and placards.
What was on the placards, to your knowledge?
Not my king.
So simply that phrase?
Exactly.
I don't believe in hereditary monarchy, and I think this is costing a huge amount of money when lots of people are struggling and the economy's falling apart and the public services are awful, and we need to invest in that and not in Charles and his big party.
So, excuse me.
I'm not here to interview. Okay, thank you.
Why are these people being arrested for protesting in a democracy?
Supporters of the anti-monarchy group Republic were among the dozens who were arrested. Its head, Graham Smith, says he was held for nearly 16 hours.
As tens of thousands celebrated and cheered yesterday, some protested and booed. But before it got to that, anti-monarchy campaigners had already been targeted by police. Some were arrested, their placards confiscated. Graham Smith from the group Republic was one of them.
They were hoping to stop us from staging a large peaceful protest on the edge of the coronation. I think that was a spectacularly poor decision for all sorts of reasons, not least because there was no grounds for arresting us. And it is an affront to democracy, an attack on our rights.
52 people in all were taken in, some like Mr. Smith under a controversial new law, the Public Order Act. It gives police new powers to proactively target people they think are planning to disrupt. But using those powers was justified, according to a cabinet minister.
Obviously, no one likes to be arrested.
The senior officer in charge of the security operation said the context of these arrests was key.
Democracy, not monarchy!
But with a former chief constable warning about the spectre of a totalitarian police state, the Met's now fending off claims it acted like counterparts in Moscow. Robin Brandt, BBC News.
Tweeted the UK director of Human Rights Watch, "These are scenes you'd expect to see in Russia, not the UK." Graham Smith is leading Britain's Republican movement. He was released from custody later that day, writing, "I've been told many times the monarch is there to defend our freedoms. Now our freedoms are under attack in his name."
In a statement, Human Rights Watch said, "This is something you would expect to see in Moscow, not London. Peaceful protests allow individuals to hold those in power to account, something the UK government seems increasingly averse to."
Though loud, the turnout here is small compared to those who've come out to welcome the new king. But polls do show the popularity of the royals has dwindled from 75% a few years ago to 52% in the most recent poll. What many find hard to stomach is that this ceremony will cost the taxpayer $80 million at a time when many are struggling to pay their bills. Charlie Angela, Al Jazeera, London.
This is a really important point to get across, because what the new Public Order Act does, alongside other pieces of legislation passed by this Tory government, such as the Police Crackdown Bill, the Police Crime Sentencing and Courts Act, as it's now known, as well as many other pieces of legislation. And let's not pretend like the 1986 Public Order Act is any better. More about that later in the video. But what the Tories have done with all of these pieces of legislation is they have introduced fascist legislation in the UK. People have been criticised for saying that the right to protest is over because this isn't Putin's Russia. People in other countries have it way worse than us. At least it's not like North Korea. But I think that's a really misguided take, because the fact that other people have it worse doesn't mean that we should be okay with minor fascism, because it's not as bad for us and other people have it worse. And what people need to understand is that in law, in both domestic and international law, there is a difference between a right and a privilege. A right is universal and unconditional. No matter what, you have a right to this thing. You have a right to life, a right to not be murdered, a right to not be tortured or abused, a right to emergency medical care. These are fundamental human rights that nobody has the right to take away from you, no matter what. A privilege is not universal and it is conditional. You can have this thing if you meet certain requirements or conditions, if you follow certain rules, if you pay a fee, whatever. That is the fundamental difference. And protest in a democracy is supposed to be a right. Universal and unconditional. You have a right to protest against your government. But what the Tories have done is they have taken away your right to protest, and they have replaced it with a privilege to protest in the hopes that you won't notice. Yes, of course, protest is still totally legal as long as you have permission from the police, and the police are not lying to you about the permission they have given you, and your protest isn't too noisy, and your protest isn't too effective, and you accept that the police have the right to tell you you have to finish your protest now at any moment, even if you've only just arrived. If you follow all of these rules and meet all of these requirements and conditions, then you have the privilege to protest. But protest is supposed to be a right in a democracy, not a privilege. The Tories have introduced fascism through the back door. And I'm not the only one saying this. There's been a lot of people warning about this for a very long time. I myself have been working on an album to raise awareness about this for the past 2 years called Axis of Rebellion, which I'm sure you're going to hear a lot more about over the next year if you are subscribed to my channel. However, whilst we are undoubtedly entering into a new era of fascism in the UK, this has been coming for a long time, and there have been problems of authoritarian in the UK coming for a very long time. It has always been a problem that the police swear allegiance to the king, to the crown, to the monarchy, and not the people or the elected government. And now, in this age of proto-fascism, with actual fascist legislation on the books and a government full of wannabe full-on fascists, we also have mass surveillance technology being rolled out by the very institutions we can least trust to protect us in society, the police. On the coronation weekend, they used facial recognition technology, which should worry all of us because the amount of data about you that the police are able to obtain via facial recognition technology is the kind of data that historically they would only have been able to get about you if you were actually convicted and given a criminal record, or if they actually got a warrant to get that amount of information on you, if they had a cause to suspect you of committing a crime or being involved in crime. But now they can get this level of information on anyone, anytime, thanks to facial recognition technology. And the use of this technology at the coronation comes just months after Big Brother Watch broke the news to the world that the 77th Brigade of the British military has been spying on British citizens, which is a flagrant abuse of human rights. So we know that the state is more than willing to clamp down on human rights and spy on people indiscriminately, even if they have nothing to hide. And even if you are one of those people who says that, well, I have nothing to hide, so it doesn't matter. Okay then, publish your medical records. Oh, what's that? You quite value your right to privacy? There might be a reason why that's actually one of your human rights.
We were going to appear in yellow, so we made ourselves known. We gave a place where we were going to be. We told them exactly what we were going to do. They'd okayed it. and okayed it all the way up until the day before. Essentially, peaceful demonstration has been attacked under the guise of authoritarian draconian laws. That's what's happened here.
I think it's playing out some of the fears that a lot of campaigners had about these new acts, is that it gives wide-ranging powers. This whole notion of being equipped to lock on, right? That could be a bike lock you're carrying to lock your bike up. That could be, in this case, potentially like straps that you're using or like a padlock that you're using to secure your van. So it's clearly they're misusing these new powers already, and I think that's pretty concerning.
Police use controversial facial recognition cameras, searching for known troublemakers. One protester was identified by facial recognition technology and appeared to be the subject of the new police low tolerance.
This is fascism! I'm being arrested just for being here!
Patrick Thelwell was convicted of throwing eggs at the king.
Wow, they were just watching me from that little tower over there. You know, I just suddenly, you know, I see all of the cameras pointing at me, all the little things on a swivel, you know, and then they're just like, there he is. I gave him a little wave. And then, you know, next thing, you know, hands behind my back, getting handcuffed, snatch squad moved in and just dragged me out, basically.
And whilst we're on the topic of the police abusing their power, it might be opportune to mention that as well as the 8 members of Republic, the police also arrested journalists as well.
I showed the police my press accreditation immediately, but they still proceeded to arrest me. I think it's kind of a recipe for disaster when police are given such wide-ranging powers. With the new public order bill, if you cycle to a protest and have a bike lock, then you could be arrested.
The police also arrested several Just Stop Oil protesters. Now, you might be forgiven for thinking, what did they do? Well, their crime was wearing t-shirts that said Just Stop Oil and waving flags. Well, not even that, planning to wave flags which say Just Stop Oil. They were actually targeted by police and arrested before they even had a chance to show their t-shirts, thanks to facial recognition technology. I shouldn't need to point out that it's not actually illegal to wear t-shirts and wave flags, but yeah, this is the moment some Just Stop Oil activists were arrested, as well as journalists.
There was another procession along the Mall this morning. The protesters marched away to the beat of the drum.
Okay, for the meantime, it's 9:50. I'm arresting you for...
You're under arrest, okay, for...
Press.
You're arresting a journalist. Okay. Can we just... I'm not saying that's not wrong, but let's just double-check that. Yeah. That's what they're suggesting anyways.
I'm being arrested for my actions. I am simply holding a banner in Westminster and I'm being arrested for my actions. There's a journalist with a press pass next to me who is being arrested for his actions.
At this time, okay, you can put that away, please, sir. Put it away.
Near the Mall, police arrested supporters of the Just Stop Oil environment protest group.
I was intending to hold a banner, and that is absolutely it.
Others were warned about chanting too loudly.
Why am I being arrested?
Scotland Yard was waiting to release its arrest figures.
The police have also defended their actions, which included using facial recognition cameras. They claim they'd received information that some were determined to disrupt.
The police also claimed that they had intelligence, not that anything they do is really intelligence-led, that protesters were planning on disrupting the coronation by throwing rape alarms at the coronation horses in order to disorientate them. Yeah, that's right. Animal rights activists and vegan protesters were really going to try and scare horses. That fits the criteria. there were no plans whatsoever to disrupt the coronation with rape alarms. So either the police are lying, or their intelligence is useless. One of those two things is true. But this brings us on to our next set of arrests. We've covered Just Stop Oil and we've covered Republic UK. Who else is on the Met Police's hit list? Well, despite the Met's long history of institutional abuse, as well as downright physical abuse on the streets of women, it wasn't that long ago since Sarah Everard was murdered by a serving Met Police officer, and yet the police still thought it was a good idea to arrest charity workers working for a charity called Night Stars, which is done in partnership with the council and the Met Police. They wear high-vis jackets with the Met Police's logo on them. And they go out when the clubs are closing, hours before the coronation, and they give out rape alarms to drunk women. This is a charity that operates in collaboration with the Met Police, and yet they were still arrested.
Hi, my name is Rhys. I was racially targeted last night and arrested by the police. I volunteer with the Westminster Council and Metropolitan Police community, working with something called Night Stars, which is this. And as you can clearly see, it says Westminster Night Stars with Metropolitan Police.
And let's not pretend like these protests were non-violent either. The picture you're currently looking at is the wrist of one of these charity workers after having been arrested. To be clear, there is absolutely no need for handcuffs to be on that tight. Many more Just Stop Oil activists were also arrested because they dared to do an educational workshop at their headquarters over 5 miles away from where the coronation was actually happening. The police raided their headquarters and just arrested everybody there because, you know, all the other arrests they'd made of charity workers, journalists, and activists who had been committing absolutely no crime whatsoever, no discernible crime at least, just wasn't quite enough for them. They just needed to arrest 64 people. Now, I volunteered to do arrestee support after the protest because I had several hours before my trip back to Germany. And also, I knew that a lot of the members of staff of Republic UK were people who had never been arrested before. Illegal protest, civil disobedience is just not really their jam. And I remember the first time I was arrested, and your first time can be a little scary, at least in the beginning, until you realise that actually it's a lot of waiting around. But it's kind of a scary experience at first, so I wanted to be there to help do arrestee support when they get out and kind of be a bit comforting. And I also waited for Just Stop Oil to get out as well. The police waited until after the 10 o'clock news to start releasing the Republic protesters. The only discernible reason for this is of a political nature, which further emphasises the point that the police are not a politically neutral institution. They swear allegiance to the very institution that was being protested against. But then they also kept Just Stop Oil in a lot longer, and by all accounts, they just did this because they hate Just Stop Oil more. There seems to be very little else to it. Also at the police station, doing arrestee support with me was a journalist by the name of Mick Wright. He is giving his account of the night.
It was a stitch-up. It was an ambush. I said this to Republic people on the day when, in our many hours of standing outside the police station in Elephant and Castle, they cannot trust the police in terms of trying to cooperate in that way. Now, if they don't cooperate at all, they'll be accused of plotting. But I think they were a little too cooperative. It was a stitch-up. The TSG were just following orders, to coin a phrase, while trying to avoid being accused of being Gary Lineker. It was deliberate, and I talked to of course this, like, you try to have two sources for any claim. I had from nearly double figures people telling me that bronze commanders, the on the ground commanders, were telling their police that were under their command, if you've got any doubt, just arrest them. We can always de-arrest them later. So the policy was arrest first, ask questions later. And what was also happening, there were many illegal arrests because many people who came out, I said, and everyone was being kept in for about 14 hours. It turned out that Republic ended up being in there for nearer 18 hours, partly because they wanted Graham not to be able to appear on the 10 o'clock news. So suddenly, around the time that the 10 o'clock news had been broadcast, things sped up and suddenly all the Republic members were released. JSO were kept in a lot longer, Just Stop Oil. Clearly, they were being treated much worse than Republic. There was a class element involved. Definitely, JSO are treated as much worse than Republic. It was a stitch-up. It was a plan. The bronze commanders were being told by silver and gold. I mean, gold is the one person running the whole operation. They were being told, crackheads, go in hard, have zero tolerance. So this was the protest in Trafalgar Square was approved, and then it was unapproved because they knew they would definitely unapprove it. Clive Lewis, the MP, the left-wing Labour MP, who is my constituency MP, was told not to appear at the rally because there had been security threats. It's my contention, and the Met refused to say otherwise, it's my contention that those threats were made up by the police to prevent Clive from speaking. All the amplifiers that would have been required for him to speak were banned anyway and seized. So it was a stitch-up. And anyone who thinks it wasn't a stitch-up is not paying attention to the evidence of their eyes and ears. We know that the Metropolitan Police regularly arrest people illegally because there have been many, many payouts for illegal arrests. In the course of these arrests over the weekend, there were people who were not told what they were arrested for. That is an illegal arrest to start with. In order to generate your defense, and in order to be able to speak in a police interview, you need to know what you were arrested for. And you need to know if they have an intent to charge you. And if they don't do that, then that is an illegal arrest. The BBC allowed Ken Marsh to talk all over the shop and basically lie. It's also worth remembering that police aren't allowed to be unionized. So police federations are just another offshoot of the police. They are just another official spokesman for the police. And what's happened here is the Met, too cowardly to put up serving officers or, officers that were involved in the operation, put up Ken Marsh, a man whose entire job is to just do propaganda for the police. Police were involved in illegal arrests. They acted like a gang. There was a few years back, might have been even more than a few years back, there was a Met police poster that said, "Our gang is tougher than your gang." That is their mentality. Most people were arrested and now have been released pending further investigation. And wouldn't you know it, that pending further investigation involves the seizure of their phones, which of course is a way to disrupt activist networks, and also to make it very hard for people to appear on the media. Yesterday, LBC said, well, we tried to get Republic to appear, but no one was answering their phones. Do you know why? They're in the Metropolitan Police's hands. That's why. So they cut the head off the Republic protest. They harassed Just Stop Oil. They attacked Animal Rising. They arrested people who were just there to help with women's safety, which is really special given the fact that we have had two prominent cases about serial rapists in the Met, one of whom murdered Sarah Everard. So The Met trying to stop women being safe in London is a real PR triumph for a force that continues to do this stuff. And to say, well, nothing happened, but we arrested them all, so there were nothing happened. You can't then, it's a post hoc ergo propter hoc. Because we did this other thing didn't happen. It's unprovable. The Met are a danger to our society, and they proved it once again. There is not even rights here. Even being a journalist, these people, pathetic journalists in our industry who spent the day just tweeting about the TV coverage and not actually doing any journalism, they've shown us up, because if you're out there doing real journalism, you felt a threat that you might get lifted purely for reporting on what was happening. The police really wanted no one to look at it, and that's why a lot of people were sent out to Elephant and Castle, but not just Elephant and Castle, about 15 minutes away from the tube station. And the only journalist who attended, I attended the whole time. Someone from the PA news desk came, an ITV crew came for a little while, and Sky sent a cameraman who didn't know why he was there. And that was it. I don't think it's about royal events anymore. I think this is going to be standing operating for events, full stop. I was at university with Wes Streeting, the Shadow Health Secretary. We weren't at the same college, but I was on many protests he was on. He might have had his political career stymied if these laws were in place, because we protested hard against the tuition fees. We were on we were on anti-Iraq war marches, all kinds of stuff, and things that were allowed then would not be allowed now. What the Blair government did to suppress protest, and Thatcher government before them, has just gone supercharged here. I'm concerned for journalists because I was a nuisance to the police. I annoyed the police. Many police officers were annoyed by me at all levels over Saturday and Sunday. And they could have arrested me for that. I don't wish to give them any ideas, but the law is very loosely drafted. So basically, the biggest threat I said this on Sky News, and I say it again here, the biggest threat to free speech in this country is the Conservative Party, the Labour Party, and the Metropolitan Police. And it's not trans people or left-wing people, certainly not, as Sonia Soda wrote in The Observer, that it was the left that have caused this. Once again, our incredible powers have done things we didn't even know we were doing. The right and the Liberals are basically given us a situation now where protest is illegal. And I would say to the right, do you remember when the Countryside Alliance kept getting lifted and nicked under the Blair era? It could happen to your pressure groups and your campaign groups when there is a different kind of government. And you'll moan and whine about it then, but you gave us this. This is the inheritance we have, that protest is de facto illegal in this country now.
2 women came out and they were wearing Westminster Council branded jackets, which also said Metropolitan Police on them. They're from a nighttime safety team that give out rape alarms, but also help people who are in distress. They'd been searched, rape alarms had been found.
Some people might say that it was a significant event, a historic event, that perhaps it wasn't an overreach by the Met Police. The day went relatively smoothly. What would you say to that?
The day didn't go smoothly because there were innocent people detained by the police for 14 hours, treated abysmally.
The Met responded to Mick directly on Twitter, saying the reason for the arrest was that there was a concern for military colleagues that this could scare horses involved in the procession.
Ah yes, the military horses with big bass drums and trumpets playing next to them, which are used to regularly hearing gunfire, are going to be scared by the rape alarms.
We had plans for peaceful, lawful protest. We'd had 4 months of discussions with the police, and they had repeatedly said they had no concerns about our plans whatsoever. And then on the day, we turned up with our placards, and immediately about 40 or 50 police officers were on the street where we were and descended upon us, arrested us, searched us and our vans. And we were then detained for at least 16 hours. We've been bailed, phones confiscated, and we're still waiting to hear what's happened. And there is no evidence and no cause for any suspicion whatsoever.
But what grounds have they arrested you on?
Well, the statement they put out was that it was a conspiracy to breach the peace, this new legislation that was rushed into force last week. When they actually arrested us, it was on suspicion of being equipped to lock on, which is a new offence, which we were not equipped to do. So, we have very serious concerns about the conduct of the officers on the ground, and whoever further up the chain of command were telling them to do this.
There's also been a certain amount of hypocrisy over the whole issue regarding freedom of speech. Just a few years ago, Tory MP Lee Anderson tweeted, "Free speech is a fundamental part of any civilised society, and no one should be silenced if they think there are important issues that need to be raised." And yet, on the weekend of the coronation, he tweets, "Not my king. If you do not wish to live in a country that has a monarchy, the solution is not to turn up with your silly boards. The solution is to emigrate." Of course, because don't protest about anything, ever. Don't raise your voice about important issues that you believe need to be raised. Just leave. But low-life Tory MPs weren't the only ones keen to get in on the free speech hypocrisy over the protests about the monarchy on the coronation weekend. Renowned transphobe Julia Hartley-Brewer also had a lot to say regarding these protests. She did an interview with Graham from Republic, and also, Faith, you may have heard a lot from this YouTube channel, Ian Duncan Smith. Let's take a look at what she had to say.
You've had a personal apology from a senior police officer, is that right?
Yeah, I mean, the chief inspector turned up at my door last night whilst I was in the middle of another interview, and he apologised. They seemed very embarrassed, to be perfectly honest. The Met themselves, I don't think, have apologised. They've used this sort of woolly phrase about regretting that we couldn't protest, but I think obviously they are aware of potential legal implications, and we are going to take advice on lawyers about what we do next.
But for unlawful detention?
Yes, absolutely. And I think we also want answers to where the decisions came from and whether there was political pressure on senior officers in the Met, because I think, as I said, it was very clearly premeditated, and they were fully aware, both beforehand and on the day, that what our plans were, and yet they still disrupt.
And that's the key thing, isn't it? Because a lot of people, and again, even the government ministry got in touch with me, being very, very clear about, well, look, on the day, there was a lot of pressure, they had lots of threats, you've got to know the context of this. But you say, they did know what you're about your plans, and and when these arresting officers, say 30, 40, even 50 police officers, when they turned up, you did explain who you were and that you had permission for this, and did you presumably have a contact name or number for somebody who they could contact to verify this?
The officer said, I said to the officer arresting me that we have had these long conversations with the Silver Commander superintendent. He said, "Can you name that person?" I said, "Yes." I gave him the name. And he just said, "Well, meetings don't really mean anything, do they?" So he was clearly not interested. And the police said to us on numerous occasions, and other police forces around the country, they said, "Look, our concern, what we want is to avoid any surprises. If people suddenly turn up on a day, we don't know who they are, then we are concerned." And yet we did everything right. We couldn't have done any more, and they still arrested us. And anybody who thinks, it was okay to arrest us, you might find yourself wanting to protest against an abhorrent government policy. You might find yourself wanting to protest against a grave injustice, or against a visiting world leader who is, persecuting their citizens. And your right to protest no longer exists, in my view, in this country. It's very much contingent on whether or not the police and the ministers will allow you to do that. And that is a very serious problem in a democratic society.
Let's talk to Ian Duncan Smith. He's former leader of the Conservative Party, and he joins me right now. Good morning to you.
Morning.
Thank you very much for joining us. Lots to talk about. I want to talk about local elections, fallout and all of that. But your thoughts, first of all, on those arrests and the Met Police releasing those 6 people after 16 hours being held in police cells, saying no charges will be brought, no evidence against them, and saying they regret those arrests. Do you think that was justified, given the proceedings, given threats from other organisations, or do you think they were actually, basically overreaching their powers?
Well, interestingly, these arrests were not made under the new powers given to them. So first and foremost, those who were complaining about the new stuff that would be wrong. This was made simply by the police on the basis that they thought, as I understand it, that these individuals were going to be doing something to disrupt the procedures. I don't know where they got that information from or what supposed intelligence they had. Certainly it looks like if they'd searched the vans and searched the individuals, they wouldn't have found any equipment at that stage. So it did seem to me that if they hadn't found any equipment at that point, they should have let them get on with their business. I just don't quite understand why they took them into custody if it was clear and obvious at the time when they were searching them that there weren't these bits of equipment that they thought they were.
Do you think this had been agreed in advance? We know they'd said, the Met Police had said there would be a low tolerance for disruption, but that's the thing. There was no evidence whatsoever this organisation that had been in talks with the police about where their protest would be in Trafalgar Square, visible, seen, heard, but not disrupting proceedings. That is what we allow in a democracy, isn't it? There's no evidence that they were going to do anything else. Graham Smith, who we're going to talk to later, we understand, told the police who arrested, look, here are the people I've been talking to in the Met Police, this is what we've agreed, we're here legally, and they were still taken into custody for all those hours.
Yeah, I think there's no question the police will have to explain why the police on the ground took them into custody. But I must say that we'll need to know exactly what was in the minds of the police officers that arrested them and took them into custody, why they took them into custody.
Yeah, I mean, of course, the issue, of course, the simple phone call to senior people would have discovered, that these people are we know we're fine with these guys, let them get on their way. Again, I'm not entirely sure that our policing of our fundamental human rights and democratic rights in this country should be based on, what a couple of police officers think. That's my worry.
So, Julia Hartley-Brewer, free speech is so important. Until a trans person tries to ask you to respect their pronouns, then they need to shut up. Freedom to protest is so important. Until it becomes just a little bit too inconvenient for you, or they care too much about climate change, or they're trans people who want rights, then they need to be stopped. And Ian Duncan Smith, apart from the blatant just incorrectness about the claim that these new laws weren't in use, these new laws were actually the excuse that the police tried to use for arresting Republic members, claiming that the adjustable Velcro straps could hypothetically be used as a lock-on. Either Ian Duncan Smith didn't read the detail of the Public Order Act that he voted for, or he is lying. One of those two things is true. I will let you make up your mind which one. But Ian Duncan Smith, on the radio, defending the rights of people to legitimately protest? I'm sorry, is this the same Ian Duncan Smith who tried to prosecute me under Section 5 of the 1986 Public Order Act that makes it a criminal offence to cause alarm or distress with your words, simply because I said to him, and I quote, "You should be ashamed of yourself. Shame on you. Shame on you for the 4 million children growing up in poverty under Tory welfare reforms. Shame on you for the tripling of homelessness in this country. Shame on you for the total lack of action on climate change, condemning my entire generation to a shitty future. Shame on you for the privatisation of our education service. Shame on you for the fragmentation and defunding of our NHS. These are just small snippets of all the reasons why people hate you. It's why people call you scum. It doesn't come out of nowhere. It comes from what you've done to ordinary people's lives. To you, this is just politics, just another boring day at the office. But Tory policy has a real impact on innocent people's lives. Tory policy that you cast your vote for, that you supported by being a member of the Conservative Party. Every single policy that hurts ordinary people that I love and care about, day in, day out, and then you wonder why some people call you scum. You will never understand the pain and misery that people like you have caused. Shame on you, Tory scum. And for that, he failed, but he tried to prosecute me for something which carries a potential maximum sentence of 6 months imprisonment for causing alarm and distress with words. Now, luckily, the most senior magistrates judge in England and Wales found me innocent on free speech grounds because it's not actually illegal to give political speeches to politicians at protests. Shock horror. Maybe that's something that could be covered in the next Public Order Act. But hang on a minute, I'm not just talking about a criminal trial that happened to me recently. No, Ian Duncan Smith has decided that he doesn't like the decision made by the Chief Magistrate Judge in England and Wales, and is appealing his decision to the High Court. So I will be tasked with the frankly horrifying responsibility of defending free speech in the High Court. Terrifying responsibility, because he doesn't like some speech that I did. And because he doesn't like some speech that I did, he thinks I should be prosecuted under a Public Order Act passed by his government, albeit back in the days of Thatcher, that carries a potential custodial sentence. Oh, but I care so much about the rights to protest in a democracy. We're not Russia. We're better than that.
So possibly sue the police?
That's certainly something we're considering, and the other thing we're considering is a lot more protests. We're certainly not going to be deterred from protesting.
I'd also just like to point out, and this was probably because the police had arrested the actual members of staff of Republic and I was wearing all of their merch, that upon arriving at the protest, for about the first 2 hours, I basically did nothing but talk to journalists. And 99% of the interviews I gave have not been published or released. I'm guessing it was because, given that I'm on a student exchange in Germany, for the week leading up to the protest, there wasn't really anything I could do to help other than share stuff on social media. And so I was really clued up on lots of facts and figures and statistics and stuff about the monarchy. And I was basically just spitting fire about the economics of it all and the legal implications of it all. And I guess a lot of different media organisations just didn't want that much heavy, compact, fact-based criticism of arguably one of the most powerful institutions in society. But I would just kindly say, Guardian, if you are going to use my image in your thumbnail, in the thumbnail of your video, include the interview you did with me. Don't just not use that footage, but use my thumbnail, because it just seems a bit rude, is all I'm saying.
Not my king! 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 Not my king!
So that's about everything I've got to say for this episode of Radical Rants. We have covered the coronation, as well as free speech hypocrisy, and the many people who were wrongly arrested over the coronation weekend. I will be doing more Radical Rants video in the near future, but they will be sporadic and not regular. Please do subscribe to the channel and like this video if you enjoyed it. Radical Rants will not normally be as long as this video. This is an extra long video because I had lots of footage to work with from a big protest and a lot of really important points to make. Normally my Radical Rant videos are between 5 and 10 minutes. And normally as well, it's just me talking in the background. So like you don't have to physically watch it. There's not normally footage in here to watch. It's normally just sort of like news rants that you can have on in the background. So yeah, thank you very much for watching the latest episode of Radical Rants. Please do like and subscribe. Hit the bell notification if you want to know as soon as I upload something. Very, very soon I have my double album, Axis of Rebellion, coming out, as well as its prequel and its sequel. More about that in the future. But until then, I have been Radical. Yes, that is my real name. And I will see you all very soon, maybe on the streets. Solidarity. I'm going to leave you with more footage from the protests. Solidarity.
Why should we arrange our entire constitution just because American tourists like to have a selfie outside Buckingham Palace?
Not my king! 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 Not my king!
Subjects! Citizens, not subjects! Citizens, not subjects! Citizens, not subjects! Citizens, not subjects!
Not my king, 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 not my king.
So I don't believe that monarchy is the best way to select a head of state. Being born is not a qualification. And I believe that the monarchy entrenches and enshrines privilege in our society, reinforces the entitlement that the elites have had for centuries and millennia in this country. And if we are to be a proper democracy and a grown-up democracy in a modern world, we should have a head of state that is chosen by the people.
They cost the taxpayer over £1 billion a year that we know about. This event is costing over £100 million that we know about. And meanwhile, I have walked past so many homeless people on my way here today. There's 4 million children growing up below the poverty line, millions more in poverty, including in-work poverty, people struggling to heat their homes and feed themselves. Meanwhile, whilst we're in a cost of living crisis, they're in a golden carriage. I just think it's so utterly wrong. I think that we should have a referendum, we should have a democratic say, let's abolish the monarchy, make monarchy history, and actually put this to the British people.
Most people are just here to see a bit of history, and they're pretty happy to talk to us and engage with us. The police, on the other hand, have been completely out of control. Our 6 main organisers have been arrested on the way to the protest. They won't tell us why they've arrested them, they won't tell us where they've taken them, and they've seized hundreds of our placards. It really does feel like something out of a police state. So they seized a bunch of our guys, held them against walls, forced them down. And, you know, these are pretty middle-aged, middle-class, like, peaceful demonstrators. We're here about an abstract issue, about getting rid of the monarchy, and the police response has been completely over the top.
Not my king! 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 Not my king!
Cool. So my name is Radical. I actually came down from Germany because I'm doing a student exchange till the end of September, but normally I study in Manchester. I'm here protesting the monarchy today because I believe that in the 21st century it's absolutely disgusting that we have an unelected head of state who doesn't pay their fair share of tax, who has paid 0% in inheritance tax, and who the taxpayers are expected to pay over £1 billion every year. This event has cost over 100 million that we know about. Meanwhile, there is, you know, homelessness tripled, 4 million children growing up below the poverty line. millions in fuel poverty, food poverty. We're in a cost of living crisis, and they're in a golden carriage that has also cost the taxpayer millions. And then to top it all off as well, we're all supposed to be equal under the law. They say that this isn't a political institution, but they have the power to change legislation before Parliament even sees it, which is completely undemocratic. They've used this power at least over 160 times that we know about, including making themselves exempt from tax, all equalities legislation, and all environmental legislation. I think that's wrong, and I think it's completely wrong that we've never had a democratic say over this. So I'm here today calling for a referendum for the abolition of the monarchy, and let's have a proper democracy.
I'd like to see a republic with maybe some kind of president.
What about Rishi Sunak as president?
Say again?
What would you think of Rishi Sunak as president?
I wouldn't like that at all, but at least I'd know that I could unelect him. That's the difference. I can't unelect King Charles, but I can unelect any president who got elected.
I think this coronation is a disgusting waste of an estimated £250 million. The royal family sits at the top of a pyramid of inequality in this country. There's classism and snobbery in this country, and it's because of them at the very, very top.
I'm here to exercise my democratic right, and since I'm paying approximately £5 for this coronation today, I feel I've got just as much right to come here as the royalists who have paid their £5.
I don't think that it does the country a great service. I don't think he is hard-working. I don't think that it's a good way that the country gets reflected around the world. I don't believe in people who aren't elected having positions of power, especially privileged people.
I believe in democracy, and monarchy is by its very nature undemocratic. I believe in equality, and inequality is a huge problem in this country at the moment, and they epitomise inequality.
We're told the idea that everybody loves the royal family and that we all sort of enjoy the feudalistic aspect of bowing down to people, and it's just so not true. Most people are indifferent, and a few of us actually feel it's important to come out and say, right, I'm against the monarchy. As people, it's nothing to do with them personally. The whole idea that we've got this institution that corrupts the whole country. If you look at it carefully, we've got a system of landed gentry clawing in wealth after wealth. The Duke of Westminster, $9 billion a year, and they pay no tax on it. It's just an unfair society, and this is just the pinnacle of it. So what we need to do is to challenge that narrative that it's okay to have dukes and lords that we're supposed to bow down to, that are creaming in the wealth. They don't have to go to food banks. They go to food banks for photo opportunities. People in this country are going to food banks because they can't afford to eat.
What would you say to people who are saying that you're ruining their day today?
We had a designated area here which was agreed by the police, and it wasn't the case that we were spoiling their day next to us. It was a mixture of royalists who either deliberately came here to provoke, and some of them were actually, and the police told them off. But also, if they'd have been better informed, they would have gone to the other 95% of the route, where they would have seen a lot more red, white and blue, and hearing a song which mentions one person but doesn't mention the nation.
My money is also paid for this day. It's taxpayers' money that's paid for this, and the taxpayers are allowed to disagree with that and show that we disagree with that. So if people want to come out and celebrate, absolutely fine, but I don't think it's their place to want everyone to agree with them.
I think it's really important for people to know that there is a different side to the story. There is an estimated, I think it's over half of all young people under 45 are now in favour of abolishing the monarchy, and it's really, really important that those people are represented.
There's been plenty of media coverage of every other part of the coronation, so I don't think we've ruined anyone's day. We're just a very small part of it. I'm very happy happy for other people to come along and support the King, but they need to support my right to say no, thank you very much.
There is no cost of living crisis for the rich, as the rich get richer and the poor get poorer.
There are nurses, there are teachers, there are train drivers, there are people going hungry, people who are struggling for a decent wage. That money could have gone to help them, but instead it's going towards this pompous ceremony, which is just for vanity, really.
The money could have been far better spent on hospitals, on the education service, or on cleaning up the rivers.
Do you agree with the argument that the royal family brings in a lot of tourism?
I think it's very, very overstated. Most of the research shows that it doesn't.
Down with the King! Down with the King!
I don't know, kind of in disbelief that it's really, that we're living in this moment of authoritarianism.
What did you say? That Graham's been arrested?
Because I don't believe in hereditary monarchy, and I think this is costing a huge amount of money when lots of people are struggling and the economy is falling apart and the public services are awful, and we need to invest in that and not in Charles and his big party.
And I think it's disappointing in this country where we are now. It's very modern, very forward-thinking, very inclusive country. We've still got this fascination with the monarchy who seem to think it's fair in this day and age. Cost of living crisis, people are struggling, really, really struggling to spend such an elaborate amount of money on a party, basically.
It's absurd that in the 21st century we, as like a leading nation of the world, still have a hereditary head of state. It's ludicrous. It's an affront to democracy. It's insane that that they still have so much power constitutionally compared to even other countries that have constitutional monarchies.
We were here to uphold the simple democratic principle that Britain's head of state should be elected by the people and based on merit, not inherited and not without the consent of the public.
Our intention is to show that there is a Republican movement in the UK, and it is growing every single day. The trends show more and more people dislike the monarchy and want an elected head of state or no head of state or a democratic alternative to what we have now, and we're here just to show that we exist, and this is a very common belief in the UK.
The whole point of today from the Republican side was visibility. It was just to show that when the cameras panned round, that they wouldn't see just rows and rows of Tory loyalists, and to show the world that we're not a nation of monarchies.
And there's a kid somewhere out in the country, maybe in a stately home, maybe on a council estate, who would make a brilliant president one day.